Here's a blast from the past that I never thought I would be talking about. Anita Sarkeesian. Now, if you go over to her channel, you will realize that she's not doing very well. Even though her channel is twice as big as mine, it shows that size doesn't always matter. It's what you do with it. Because if you look at her videos, she's barely getting more than 3,000 views per video, and even if that. And it shows that I was right a couple of years ago when Jonathan McIntosh and Anita Sarkeesian parted ways. I said that you'll see that the mainstream media will stop promoting her and she's going to fade into irrelevance. And this is what happened. The mainstream media only used her as long as she was useful. The moment her usefulness stopped being important and relevant, they parted ways. I mean, this was a person who appeared on Time magazine as one of the most influential people. She spoke at the United Nations. She was being paraded as the best video game critic in the world, and you would find like articles in the mainstream media about her. But now that the video gaming companies, they managed to get their own ideologues, they managed to get their own progressive stack within them, they don't need someone like Anita Sarkeesian anymore. You know, like video games are incredibly progressive nowadays, so she literally has no more room because other more important people have to fit that position. So she has been discarded by the mainstream media, and you might find an article about her here and there, but overall, she's on her own. And since she isn't good at producing content, well, her views are really low. And it's also interesting to point out that she goes back to talking about movies because she never liked video games. I mean, she admitted that herself, and whenever she would announce that she would do a Let's Play, it was just her talking about the game while someone else was playing it. That's very bizarre, especially in a world where everyone is streaming nowadays. But what's interesting is that last year, she even sold her entire collection. So you can see her tweet, if someone had a giant collection of Xbox and PS4 games, plus a handle of PS2 and PS1 Wii, and wanted to get rid of them, donate them, how and where would one go about doing that? Also, a few older console tips, please. Now, if you're a real gamer, you don't have to ask this because you actually know about it. But she is pointing out that this is the collection that she is going to get rid of. And a lot of people that play video games also point out, it's like, look, no one likes all of these genres. Like, this is the very definition of a tryhard. I mean, she likes racing games, she likes adventure games, she likes strategy games, she likes Dark Souls, she likes everything. Every single game out there she likes. Well, not a lot, because now she gave them away. And overall, I think this is a huge mistake on her part. Like, I understand, you know, she didn't like video games, but she found a way to make a lucrative business. The mainstream media was hyping her up, and her whole purpose was to push far-left ideology into the gaming entertainment medium. Like, I get that. But you would think that in all these years, she had the time to at least learn how to play some video games so that when the media won't parade her anymore, she would have something interesting on her channel. Because there are a lot of people that still want to hear a progressive take on video games. For example, they would go to Sean and Jen or some other social justice YouTuber because at least those play games. And they know what they're talking about rather than just watch a couple of trailers and then give a very uneducated but highly ideological opinion on it. Now, if you're unaware, CD Projekt Red is under attack. And it's no surprise, really. CD Projekt Red was under attack with The Witcher 3, and now is being under attack with Cyberpunk. One of the main reasons is that being an Eastern European company, it doesn't conform to the ideology promoted by the talking heads at the United States. And that's a good thing, because if you look at the United States, you see that a lot of video gaming companies that are going very woke, they're also going very broke. EA Games, I believe, lost 40% of its stocks. Ubisoft, I believe, also lost a big chunk. Activision is firing people, right? So they're doing really poorly. Meanwhile, video games from Japan and video games from Eastern Europe are doing great. We're witnessing a renaissance, if you can call it like that. A couple of years ago, Capcom was suffering badly, but now I think they redeemed themselves a little bit with Resident Evil 2, the remake, which was very well received and very well executed. You have Death Stranding that's going to come up. There's a lot of cool games that are coming from Japan. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and many others. And they're, revitalizing the industry. So when you have other game companies like the CD Projekt Red, which made The Witcher, it won a lot of awards and it was considered to be by far the best game of the year. You have a lot of ideologues that are livid that the game doesn't go the way they want. And one of these ideologues was actually Anita Sarkeesian, right? They criticized Witcher, and despite their criticism, it became Game of the Year nonetheless. And it made CD Projekt Red a lot of money. So why would they need you, Anita? Why are you asking them to hire you? What can you possibly bring to the table? I guess you can bring morality to the table, make them more moral, but less financially profitable. This is what you can do if they hire you, huh? But let's see her tweet. Hey, CD Projekt Red, I'm always available for consulting, cause it sure sounds like you might need it before the whole of the internet drags you for what you sound like some potentially sexist representation, which we all know you've struggled with in the past. Yikes. I wonder which type of people accuse CD Projekt Red in the past of being sexist? Oh, that's right, it was Anita Sarkeesian and her buddy Macintosh, Team Rocket. And you have this article in Forbes, written by Eric Kane, a video game journalist that is respected in the video gaming community. And he's by no means a right-leaning person, right? Because I understand right-leaning people are evil. But no, he's also a left-leaning person, and unlike Anita Sarkeesian, he actually plays the games rather than just look at the intro. And as he points out, the criticism that Macintosh and Sarkeesian were giving to The Witcher is that Geralt is an emotionless person, and this reflects on toxic masculinity, and it's really bad for the culture, and it's a very problematic game. And he points out that that's not correct. Like, if you look at the trailers, maybe that's what you get from them, but anyone who played The Witcher realizes that the character is more like Clint Eastwood. He does care deeply about many people in his life. He smiles a lot. Though he's not the grinning type, his smiles are composed. He's also incapable of crying because of his mutations and is sterile for the same reason, but he is the adoptive father of Ciri and obviously cares about her deeply. There's little point rarely discussing Macintosh's claims since they're simply false and a waste of time, but just for fun he goes into it and explains why, I mean, even by their definition of toxic masculinity, Geralt of Rivia doesn't fit into one of them. Furthermore, it's interesting that he got a lot of backlash for this article, which is why he had to make updates and clarifications explaining why he calls Jonathan Macintosh a hipster. He explains that I get the need to use words like patriarchy and phrases like toxic masculinity because it's hip to traffic these types of terms. I'm not denying that these things exist. Patriarchy is real, according to him. There is such a thing as toxic masculinity, but Macintosh bandies them together like someone is more interested in social signaling than in hard-wrought analysis. It reminds me of the scene from Good Will Hunting, which I can't play on this channel because I would get the copyright strike. But what's more important, and what I really liked about this article, is the fact that he points out about propaganda. And he says that art is not supposed to serve as a political agenda. That's what propaganda is for. And he says that he doesn't believe that art should be devoid of politics, but when art's purpose is merely to peddle a certain political agenda, I think it loses of what it makes it art to begin with. It seems to me that people like Sarkeesian would like to gloss over all the horrible things that have happened to women in the past, and so in a piece of fantasy fiction like The Witcher, we should have a utopian world of gender equality and political correct bandits that would present the world according to Sarkeesian's political preferences and rob the art of its much needed power. And this is exactly what happened to Dragon Age 3, which is why a lot of people were complaining, because it robs you from the immersion in a medieval world. And it's also what happened to an extent to Game of Thrones the last season. Because there is beauty in ugliness. It is very difficult to appreciate the things we have in the now without knowing how bad the past was and looking at the past and saying, wow, I'm really glad that I was born today and I wasn't born 500 years ago in a medieval town where I would have been considered the lowborn and I would have never had any chance of social mobility. But people like Anita Sarkeesian, they don't want that. They want every single piece of art to be propaganda for her way of doing politics, so that people don't know that there is any other way of doing politics, so that people hate the now and they believe that we live in a very patriarchal, oppressive society. And when you look into the past, you should see a very progressive society, so you need to change the now and make it into something that people like Anita and Bell Hooks would rather have you live in. But what I find utterly fascinating is that this is like a racket. I mean, you have Anita Sarkeesian giving bad PR to CD Projekt Red, and then it's also Anita Sarkeesian that goes, hey, CD Projekt Red, you had some problems in the past, wink wink, why don't you hire me? Look, I have this consulting firm and you can pay me to make the problems go away, wink wink. It's really disgusting, and I guess it took to the point where she's desperate for money, that she is so blatantly obvious about all this. It's just astonishing, right? So the controversy with the new Cyberpunk game is that there is nudity in it, and there's a one point where you go to find a body and you have to investigate who killed that person, and the person is naked, right? It's a naked dead woman, and there's a lot of people that are over this. So the developers at CD Projekt Red explained that in the future, since people augment their bodies, they don't consider the human body to be sacred anymore, because you can just cut off an arm and you replace it with a bionic. So there's nothing sacred in it, and that's what they wanted to convey through their art. They wanted to show that that's something like seeing a dead body isn't shocking anymore in the future, where people just amputate themselves in order to become better humans. And Anita Sarkeesian is like, video game designers, let me help you to avoid these kind of mistakes. I want you to make the great games you're envisioning while appealing to a broader audience. And that includes not offending entire market segments. Well, it seems that The Witcher managed to appeal to a broader audience while at the same time offending entire market segments. So it seems that your market segments that get offended aren't really the ones that manage to get traction within the video gaming industry. Meanwhile, woke developers like the ones from Battlefield 5 probably learned their lesson about offending entire market segments, and I didn't see Anita Sarkeesian reach a helping hand to them. And the reason they do this, by the way, I don't believe in the get woke, go broke mentality, because there's a lot of woke games that do just fine. No, the problem is that once some developers go woke, and they go woke ideologically, when you have your fans doing a backlash and you have your fans telling you that they don't like it, then the developers give sass to the fans on the Twitter, the developer gives sass on the fans on different interviews, they tell the fans not to buy their games, and the fans listen. So this is the whole shtick. Now, I don't think CD Projekt Red is going to hire Anita, and honestly, they would do a really bad move if they were going to. Because their games are really great. They have shown into the past that every single game they have released was a successful hit. And I hope they keep doing what they're doing, because it's definitely working. So if anyone from CD Projekt Red listens to this, don't listen to the knee-jerk reactionists. They just want to be some parasites on your company, because this is what socialism is. It's a parasitic ideology that cannot create, and it needs something to latch on in order to do the revolution and have communism. And this is what these people are. They're socialists parading as cultural influencers. So they just want to latch on to your company, become an advisor there, and then say, oh, why don't you have a diversity team? And now you have to bring in diversity officers, which usually are based on nepotism. It just happens to be their friends, their relations, and once they get there, and they get access to the hiring process in your company, they're going to hire more of their friends in, so that when you don't toe the line and you don't create games the way they want, they can threaten you with strikes, and they can threaten you with things that you can see happening at Vox, BuzzFeed, and other publications. And there are other gaming companies and so on and so forth. So never let these people in if you have a company, especially if you have the privilege of being as successful as CD Projekt Red is. But hey, don't take my word for it. Look at some of her previous accomplishments. In 2017, we have the article by Tim Morlican saying that you can thank Anita Sarkeesian for being able to play as Emily in Dishonored 2. Now, a couple of years later, we find out that Arcane Studios says the Dishonored series is resting now due to really bad sales from Dishonored 2. And the real reason isn't because you can play a female character in the game, it's that the game didn't really offer anything new. It wasn't exciting for the new players, it was just the same as the first game. And as such, it shows that this diversity that is being advertised really doesn't influence sales. The only thing it influences is some culture critic's opinion over a game that isn't really at the end of the day going to sell you the game. The game usually sells by word of mouth and if people enjoy playing it. So for example, The Witcher 3, despite of the negative backlash from some culture critics, it was an excellent game and it managed to sell very well. Another example is Anita's visit to BioWare with the developers that made the very popular game Anthem. And apparently the people who she interacted with had a very unpleasant experience with her, considered her to be toxic, and worst of all, they felt as if they need to earn her approval in order to create the game that they really want to make. And if you really want to talk about appealing to a wider audience and making sure you don't offend people, well, when people believe that Anita might be working for Mirror Edge 2, there was a petition where 54,000 people signed that they do not want this to happen. So if you were to hire Anita Sarkeesian, you would offend 54,000 people that are potential customers to your game. But this is not about the wider audience, because Anita doesn't like the state of the gaming industry, which points out that over 65% of the entire video game industry allows you to choose the gender of the character that you want to play. However, because only 5% of these games have women-only protagonists, she views it as a major issue. So, games that allow you to choose what gender to appeal to the wider audience, they're not really good enough, are they? And this is if we accept the ridiculous notion that somehow your real-life identity connects you to the fictional identity of a video game. Meaning that I wouldn't be able to enjoy a game like Tomb Raider just because there's a female character, and for some reason I would have to play a game with a straight white man in order to emphasize more with the fictional character that I'm playing. Which is completely ludicrous and complete nonsense for any person that actually plays video games. Now, what this is about is not improving the company and making sure that the company earns more of a profit and that their game sells better. It's simply to the fact to give Anita Sarkeesian some money. Because as we see here, EA is donating $1 million to nonprofits working to end bullying and online harassment. And Anita Sarkeesian is really upset that she didn't get some of that cash herself. It is really sad to see this person's fall from grace, but Anita, if you're watching this, you have to realize you helped push an ideology that you thought you're going to be at the helm of, but now you're no longer needed. Now no one wants to associate with you. You were used to take all of the negative criticism, to take all of the backlash for this ideology being pushed on gaming, and now you're considered toxic. And companies don't want to do anything with you anymore because there are a lot of people more educated and more well-connected than you that can do your job for probably cheaper of a price. And just like Yuri Bezmenov said, once the activists accomplish their goal and they're no longer needed, it's time for normalization. Which means that people like you are no longer required. And you're going to fade back into the obscurity from which you were initially plucked from.